Hey everyone, how are you doing? You have Mike and Sierra here, and today we're talking mixed tanks and how you've been doing it wrong. So if you get easily offended, you might want to stop and turn away now, because we're getting into it right now. Alright, so before we go any further, we're going to start off by talking about some of our mistakes that we had happen. When we first got into cichlids, we kind of just picked up a bunch of fish, and we kind of put them all in one tank, and we thought it was going excellent. And everybody on YouTube was going, it's doing excellent. Like, that's excellent. But
it wasn't excellent
it
at the
wasn't.
end of the day. We were getting a lot of pats on the back, which you're going to see everywhere that promoting mixing fish and different fish that shouldn't live together. You're going to see all kinds of people encouraging it and saying that it works for them, which, hey, maybe in their case, I can't judge. But at least in my situation here, where we had our cichlids, we basically figured because they're from the same area or hybrids from that area.
But there we go. You could just mix them all together, and it was fine. It wasn't until we actually met a good friend of ours, who at the time wasn't a friend of ours, but quickly became a good friend of ours. And he basically told us, no, you're doing it all wrong. And what to really look out for. And at first, we probably didn't.
We were skeptical.
We were skeptical, yeah.
We were skeptical. We were like, well, our fish have lived together for like 3 or 4 months now. Everything seems to be going fine. We got them when they were young juveniles, so they grew up together, so they should be totally cool because everything's been good so far. But basically what we did is we had our blood parrots, which we like to keep, but we also had green terror and we had a red devil. So for those of you that don't know, basically we had a South American fish, which is our green terror, or Rivolatus. It's not really real green terror. Anyways, that's a different video. But then we had our red devil, and we also had the blood parrots. Now, the red devil and blood parrots, both Central American type cichlids, and we figured, well, they're all from some kind of American country. They should be totally fine. One day we woke up though, and like we were warned, our red devil started getting super, super aggressive. It was basically out of nowhere.
Oh yeah. Immediately at that point, we had set up another tank for her because we were told, and we were actually prepared because we were told. Even though we were still a little bit skeptical, we were still getting ready in case it happened. And basically, the way that we were explaining it is that these fish, basically, when they get to a certain size, a certain form of personality, that they have a kill switch that just basically goes off. And yeah, we were definitely
aware of it.
Aware, yes.
Because really, this is something that could happen at any point in time, and it's really common when fish become juveniles to adults that their personalities change and shift. Especially cichlids are highly intelligent fish, and yeah, they definitely can one day just decide everything else needs to go.
Yep. And that's why we kind of urge everybody in order to be very aware of what could happen in your tank. Just because it's working now, it might work for another 6 months. It might even work for a year. But at one point, at any time, that fish could go, okay, that's it, you're gone, and your whole tank is completely wiped out. So if you do have mixed fish in your tank, be aware that, it might be fine now, but you're going to always have that in the back of your mind that it could happen one day.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is that any day it could happen. You could wake up, you could not be home. Like, it could be when you least expect it, that just one day.
The most terrible timing ever, So that's why we really urge you to just keep an eye on it. And if you do have it, have a backup plan ready for if something does happen, because there's a good chance that it probably will.
Yeah, usually when people give you advice and you see it in a lot of different places, not all advice is going to be reliable, but usually if you see something over and over and over again and people tell you something over and over and over again about this fish or their personality, usually those things tend to hold true more often than not.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the things that we get asked about quite often is can I mix this fish with this fish? Like, this is one of the questions that we get asked so many times a day. And our answer is pretty much always the same thing. Maybe. Like, we don't want to tell you for sure that, this is going to work great because this worked for this guy or this worked for him. you have to take tendencies of these fish over multiple fish, and will they actually live with that specific fish? You have to really do your research in order to really get that answer. And even then, with the unique personalities of some of these South and Central American fish, very hard to judge.
So basically, with any fish you're keeping, one of the first things you want to do when looking for a tank mate, first thing you need to know is what kind of fish you have. So if you happen to have bought an assorted cichlid, African, American, whatever it might be, the first thing you want to do is actually get an ID on that fish. For one, it's going to help you better care for that fish so that you're able to provide what it needs, but it also helps you find tank mates because you need to know where you're starting.
Yeah, a great way to do this is use the resources that are available in front of you. Facebook groups, stuff like that. There's some really smart people in there who can ID some fish that you probably wouldn't think could even get ID'd, but it happens. So you use the resources available. Try to figure out exactly what you have so you know how to properly care for it.
So basically, knowing your fish not only helps you decide any tank mates, but it also helps you care for your fish you currently have. Some of the things you want to know when you're researching your fish is the diet that it needs, the tank size it's going to need, its adult size, the temperament that they normally have, where your fish comes from, and what kind of water your fish lives in. So basically, you have an idea of what kind of parameters you want to keep, and when you're picking a tank mate, you want to look for similar traits or similar things.
Exactly, yeah, that's a great way to put it. So let's start out by some of the rules here. You want to know where your fish are from. You don't want to mix continents absolutely at all. That's a big no-no. So your African cichlids with your South and Central American cichlids, let's just not do that, and let's just try to keep them at least in your Central American or South American or just pure African cichlid tanks.
Yeah, when you're mixing continents, the care requirements, diets, everything are so far off from each other that it's just not practical to keep them together. African cichlids have a way different pH and general hardness range. Generally tends to be a lot harder than you are going to see with South and Central American. So if you really want your fish to thrive, you're just not going to see it in a tank that's mixed. Because honestly, in a tank where everything's mixed, you can't control who eats what, or this fish is supposed to eat this veggie pellet or whatnot. They don't.
It doesn't really work like that.
It's wishful thinking.
It's wishful thinking. Yeah, it'd be very difficult to do that. It just doesn't work.
So a lot of people seem to think that overstocking is going to solve aggression issues or spread it out. In a way, with some fish, maybe they spread it out a little bit more. Maybe the fish is getting a little bit less harassed now. Instead of having one or two fish being harassed, you got 20 or 30 of them being harassed. Now, the issue you're going to see there is that at the end of the day, these fish are still undergoing a lot of stress. When you see stress in your tank, that can ultimately lead to diseases, illness, and just they could end up dying at the end of the day from aggression and fighting. To eliminate this kind of stuff, you want to make sure your tank is properly stocked. You want to make sure that you take into consideration the adult size of your fish and make sure that it's, within an acceptable tank. Now, putting 20 or 30 of them together in a smaller tank just to spread out aggression, you're really just causing stress on more fish instead of just a handful.
Yeah, no, that perfectly makes sense. So there's no magic rule or calculator that you can use to figure out how many fish you're going to put in your tank. That's going to have to be from your personal experience.
It's going to be based on research. It's going to be based on what your fish needs, the adult size, and things of that nature. Now, you always have to take into consideration how big that fish is actually going to get and how much waste it's going to produce. Those are factors you really need to consider because in order to have an acceptable nitrate level, if your tank is super, super overstocked, it will be basically impractical to manage that.
Yeah, unless you have a automatic water change system that's pumping out your volume of tank water a day, it's just completely unpractical to have a tank, let's say like a 55 gallon with like 45 fish in it. That's just too much. So another big argument that we get all the time is, well, my fish have grown up together and they have never shown any aggression, and
They love each other because they were together since the get-go. They think they're brother and sister.
yeah, we kind of did touch on this a couple moments ago, but I'm going to say it again. it might have worked now. It might work for somebody else. It might even work for you for a couple months, but it doesn't mean long term that it is going to work. And like I said, keep it in the back of your mind that at any point it can all go to crap.
Yeah, basically
Yeah,
that's the reality, is that at any point in time you're going to have a fish in there that's capable of taking out the other fish. One thing you see with cichlids often is that they're super territorial. So you may have a fish that claims a small area, a cave, or something like that, or you might have a fish that decides it wants the whole tank. If that's the case, everything else has to go. Especially with South and Central Americans, some of them get absolutely huge, and they really have a lot of power. I'm sure a lot of the Africans do as well, but they're definitely big, mean, aggressive fish that are powerful and can do damage to each other.
yeah. And like Sierra was saying, some of them, like let's say, for instance, a jaguar, those fish will protect their area to death. And if another fish comes in that wants that area, they will seriously defend it. So
Or die trying.
or die trying. So that's where it really comes into, like you keep saying, doing your research on the fish that you actually have and knowing what they can live with. And a good way to do that is usually to go, what can they live with in the wild? If they can live with that in the wild, maybe it could possibly work in your aquarium if you have a required tank size.
Yeah, now that's one thing that you really need to take into consideration is in the wild they have so much space that they will be able to go with things that they normally won't be able to in a small volume of water. The bigger your tank, the more likely you are going to be able to have success with mixing fish because they will be able to each claim their own areas, but that doesn't always work for every single fish or every single person. They're very much individuals, which is, I think, where we kind of underestimate fish a lot, is in thinking that they're not as intelligent as they actually are.
Oh yes, these fish are very intelligent. If you may have seen some of our other videos, we actually went how smart are your fish. If you haven't seen that, I highly suggest checking it out. And it'll give you an idea. We have even some Midas playing fetch. Just amazing footage. So these fish are very intelligent.
Yeah, and definitely they have their own personality. So just because a fish is known to be highly aggressive doesn't mean that fish is always going to be highly aggressive. Good chances are that they will, or they have the potential, but that's where you have to look at is what the potential is of that fish and the risk that you're putting your other fish in. So you always want to look at the real risks involved in your aquarium.
Yeah, and just to go back on personalities of the fish here for a moment, like Sierra was saying, our red devil, for instance, some weeks she's just a big baby. You can go in her tank and you can play around with her, and then some weeks she tears you open. And that form of aggression is just so rampant for a week or two. And then she goes back for another month where she's just being all cute and, just begging for attention. But every couple of weeks, I kind of notice a little bit of a change within some of our larger fish.
Yeah, so that's something you need to keep in mind is your fish can change at any moment in time. You can wake up and overnight your fish tank is gone or your fish tank is thriving, but the thing is, if the potential is there, because you have the risk there, because you're mixing fish that may or may not work, you're taking that chance.
Yep.
So when you are taking risks with your tank, you have to ask yourself, are your other tank mates capable of defending themselves? If you're mixing a big fish with small fish, in some cases those small fish, maybe they're not fast enough to get away, or maybe the other fish, its mouth is too big and that potential is there. So maybe they work today, but maybe not tomorrow. So you always have to look at the risks that are involved and ask, can this fish defend itself if something ever did happen? So it's really important that you monitor closely. That's probably the most important thing you can do when you are adding new fish, is do it when you actually have time to sit there and observe the tank. You want to look for signs of aggression and bullying, and you want to be able to prevent it or separate it, do whatever you need to do when you are adding that new fish.
So the next, probably one of the most important steps, if you've actually went forward and done this without doing your research and kind of ran into some issues, is always have a backup plan.
Well, even if you have big South and Central Americans, it is possible that generally sometimes they might work out, but you may just get a fish that's a bully. With any
Yes.
fish, you could just have a bully, and if that's the case, you need to have a backup plan. Even though it may seem like it's going to work in a perfect world, and on paper it does, that doesn't always mean that it will go
Yeah,
successfully, even when you are doing your research.
yeah. So having a backup plan is great. Even if you don't have another tank set up, you can always load up every single tank you have with filters. So in case you have to, pull a fish out, put it in another tank, having backup plan, backup filters is probably a good way to go about it too. I know that's what we did in the case, just because we couldn't set up another tank at the time. So we had our filters running, getting prepared for it, because we knew at some point it was going to happen, right?
Yeah, and that's one of those things when people do give you advice and stuff like that. Sometimes they're harsh, or sometimes it's hard to receive it. But really, you have to look at where it's coming from. A lot of people do have good intents and really do want to see you succeed.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to look at it this way too. I know personally, I've even messaged a couple of people, and I'm probably going to say maybe 5% of the people actually took it the wrong way. Um, a lot of the people usually are receptive to the idea that someone's helping them, and they're not really going to get offended. I've had a couple people get offended and then come back to me like a month or two later and say, you know what, you were actually right, and I've ran into this problem, and wow, that was crazy. I totally didn't expect that. So sometimes just helping somebody out, giving them advice, and you got yourself a new friend or a new subscriber in some cases, and they rather enjoy that.
Yeah,
We
so
help them,
it's because I mean we're here to help each other, and a lot of times people are afraid. It doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it, but we've all
No,
made mistakes, and we've all done things, or we've all bought fish on impulse. Everyone's done it. Everyone's going to continue to do it. That's just the way it is. Sometimes you just have to have something, and you think about it later. But we have to help each other out and consider the fish, people.
consider the fish. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys got something from this video. Like I said, we're not trying to pick on anybody here, um, but we are trying to give you guys an awakening of what could possibly happen if you guys really mix these fish together.
Yeah, really, it's about doing research and making changes as you need to. We all make mistakes. We all start somewhere. We all impulse buy, but it's all about correcting those things and trying to do the best we can for our fish. Just because you are happy with your fish doesn't mean your fish are happy or thriving. So you have to do what it takes to really consider them.
Yeah. So to recap, we don't mix continents and we don't mix lakes. Maybe some lakes, but
Know what you're
research.
doing. Know what
Research.
you're doing. Let's try to keep within the same parameters.
Yes, exactly. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't, you can give us a thumbs down, more interaction. And you guys have yourself a great day.